I'm not sure how many of you that are watching this class right now are familiar with studying Talmud, the back and forth style, question and answers. Now, sure, we usually have a Gemara class following breakfast every Sunday morning. That's, of course, while we're not practicing social distancing. So I want to use this time period that we have now to be able to introduce so many of you to learning Gemara. And I certainly hope that when the social distancing is over and we once again resume the classes at the shul, that you will be inspired to participate as well. We're studying the tractate of Brachos. If you have a book at home, you could follow along. In the tractate of Brachos, if you have the new Koren Steinsaltz edition, we're on page 341, the bottom right corner of the page. If you have the Artscroll edition, we're 53b1. And if you have the original in the Hebrew, we are on page Daf Nun Gimel Amud Beis, right at the top. The topic that we are discussing are the brachas that we're obligated to make during Havdalah. So after Shabbos, right, we're obligated to acknowledge the separation and the distinction between the holiness of Shabbos and the ordinary nature of the week. We use a cup of wine, we use a candle, and we use spices. So the current discussion is, what kind of candle are you able to make a blessing on? And more specifically, what do you have to be able to benefit from the light or not? So we're going to begin right at the beginning here on Daf Nun Gimel Amud Beis at the top. So this is a quotation from the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, "Ve'ein mevarchim al haner ad sheyoisai." The Mishnah says you are not allowed to make the bracha on a flame during the Havdalah ceremony unless you're actually able to use the flame. So the Gemara is going to now ask, what does that mean? Do you have to be able to use the flame? Do you physically actually have to be able to use it? Or maybe it's enough that you see it. So the Gemara now analyzes the Mishnah. Rav Yehuda Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, Lo ye'oisai mamish. It doesn't mean that you have to actually physically be utilizing the light itself. Rather, it means that if you can see the light, and the light is of a nature that if it happened to be that you were standing right next to it and close to it, you would be able to use it. Even if you're far from it, that would be okay. So according to the opinion of Rav Yehuda, right, who says in the name of Rav, you could be 100 feet away from the person who's making Havdalah. But as long as you can see the flame, you would be able to make the bracha and participate in the making of Havdalah. That's his opinion. V'chein amar Rav Ashi b'rachok makam sheninu. Rav Ashi concurs. Rav Ashi agrees. His position is you can be distant, you can be far from the flame, but as long as you can see the flame, you're allowed to make the bracha. However, the Gemara is going to say that we have another text that appears to contradict this, and of course we need to understand that. So the Gemara says, Meisvei, right? We learned in a Braisa, a text which appears to contradict what we just said. The Braisa says, Hoi saloi ner tmuna b'cheikoi. If a person has a flame that's concealed in their lap, that means the flame is there, but it's low down in your lap. The person doesn't see the flame. All they're able to see is the light. Oy befanas, or the flame is in a lamp. So the flame itself you can't see, but you can see the light that's being emitted from the lamp. Oy sharashal heves v'loy nishtamish loira, or you can see the light. However, you're not actually using the light itself. Oy shanishtamish loira v'loy rashal heves, or you're actually utilizing and benefiting from the light, but you're not actually able to see the flame itself. The Braisa says you're not allowed to make a bracha on this light for Havdalah unless you actually see the light itself and you're able to use the light. This would seem to be a direct contradiction from our Mishnah, where we said before, you could be 100 feet away, as long as you can see the light, it's okay. But this Braisa seems to say it's not enough that you see the light. You have to actually be able to utilize the light as well. The Gemara now is going to clarify the statement of the Braisa, just to make sure that we understood it properly. The Gemara says, Bish lama, this Braisa makes perfect sense. Mishishtamish lo'era, v'lo rash al heves, because a person is able to use light. Even if you don't see the flame and the source of the light, you can still use the light. Mishkachas la dekaima b'keren zavis. For example, there could be a huge flame that is just around the corner. You may not see the flame because the flame's around the corner, but the light could be illuminating the area that's still in front of you that you can see. Ella rash al heves v'lo nishtamish l'oira heichi mishkachas la. However, what is the circumstance that the Brisa is talking about, where you can see the light, but you're not actually utilizing and benefiting it? You see the flame, you see the fire, but you're not benefiting from it. It must be lav de merchaka. It must be, we're talking about a case where you could see the flame, it's 100 feet away from you, but you're not able to benefit. If that's what the Brisa is talking about, we have a clear contradiction. Because the Mishnah seems to be saying you could be 100 feet away and make the bracha, provided that if you were closer, you could use it. While the Brisa seems to say, no, not only do you have to see the fire, but you physically have to be able to utilize the flame. Being 100 feet away is not okay. However, the Gemara is going to reject this distinction. Because anytime you want to bring a counter proof to something, it has to be 100%, it has to be rock solid. If there's another way that you can interpret the text, even if it's not necessarily the strongest interpretation, nevertheless, we have to dismiss it as a challenge. The contradiction has to be clear and complete. So the Gemara responds, Eloi. There's no contradiction at all, because when the Brisa says that a person has to be able to use the light, it doesn't mean that you can't be far from it. Rather, what does it mean? It means kagoin de amiya v'azla. It means, for example, a scenario where a person can see the flame, but the flame is so small that you're not able to use it, even if you're standing close to it. So that means we can understand the Brisa to say you have to be able to see the light, and you have to be able to use the light, but not that you're physically using the light. It's okay if you're 100 feet away, but the flame itself has to be the type of flame that you're actually able to use. But if the flame is so small, the flame is so tiny that you can see it, but you can't use it for anything, then that would not be okay. The Gemara continues. Tan Rabbanon Gechalem Leichashos Mevorchen Alehen. The Gemara says that one of the rules when it comes to making a bracha on the flame for Havdalah is that the flame has to have been lit in order for the production of light. If the flame was lit for a different purpose other than light, then you may not be able to use it for Havdalah. So what if you have some coals? The coals are glowing, and the purpose that you lit the coals was in order to provide light. That's okay. Glowing coals, you're actually able to use for Havdalah to make the bracha on it. However, what if the coals are dimming? They're not producing bright light. There may be light there, but they are fading away. And at this point, you're not allowed to use them anymore. The light is fading. So the Gemara asks a question, what is the definition of coals that are glowing? How do you define that? At what stage does the light have to be in the coals to make the bracha for Havdalah? So the Gemara responds, Amar Rav Chisda kol she'ilu machnes lesoichen kisam v'dolkas meheleh. Rav Chisda answers the question. He says any scenario where you can take like a splinter of wood and stick it into the coals, and the splinter of wood would catch fire in itself. You don't have to blow it, you don't have to fan the flames. If the splinter would catch fire itself, that would be okay, and you would be able to make the bracha on the glowing coals. The Gemara now asks a technical question, and this is the type of thing that the Gemara does all the time. It goes from topic to topic. Sometimes it seems to jump around. One of my favorite rabbis in yeshiva would call studying the Gemara like attending a farbrengen. One rabbi says this, one rabbi says something else, another thing comes out of left field. Now, in the middle of this discussion about the laws of what type of flame you're allowed to make a bracha on, the Gemara asks a total technical spelling-related question. The Gemara says we just talked about the coals that are dimmed. How do you spell that word dimming? We know that the word is oimamus, but is it oimamus with the letter aleph, or is it oimamus with the letter ayin? How do you spell the word properly? So the Gemara answers, Ta Shema the Amar Rav Chisda bar Rav Dimi. We learned that Rav Chisda, the son of Rav Dimi, said, there's a verse in the book of Yecheskel. The context here is Yecheskel is describing the kingdom of Assyria, and it describes it as a big, beautiful, amazing, powerful tree. And it says, Arazim lo ya'amamu began Elohim. And in the book of Yecheskel, it says that even the cedars growing in Gan Eden, big, mighty, powerful trees, they cannot dim the strength, the power, the majesty of the kingdom of Assyria. In the book of Yecheskel, the word oimamus, the word dimming, is spelled with an ayin. So the Gemara concludes, what's the correct way of spelling the word oimamus, dimming? It is with an ayin and not with an aleph. The Gemara now returns to the question of making a blessing on the fire and continues the discussion. Do you have to be able to use it, or do you not have to be able to use it? And the Gemara says, Rava Amar, the great sage Rava says, Ya'isei mamish. You actually have to be able to use the flame itself. So not only do you have to see the flame, but the flame has to serve a purpose for you. The Gemara says, what does this mean you have to use it? Right? What is the definition of a fire and a flame that you're using? Amar Ula, the great sage Ula says, Kedei sheyaker bein iser lepundian. Ula's definition of using the flame is you have to be able to tell the difference between two coins that look similar to each other. So a coin that was called an iser and a coin that's called a pundian. So the definition of using light is to be able to tell the difference between things that look similar to each other. The practical application of this today is that when we make Havdalah and we want to make a bracha, we put up our hands like this, and that the flame should illuminate and that we could see the difference between the skin of our fingers and our nail. So if the light is light enough that we can look up and we can see the difference between the skin and the nail, you're able to make a bracha. And this is where the idea ultimately comes from. Chizkiya Amar, another sage, Chizkiya says, how light does it have to be? Kedei sheyaker bein meluzma shel Tveria lemeluzma shel Tzipuri. So according to Chizkiya, the light has to be powerful enough for you to be able to distinguish between the two different weights, the weights of Tveria and the weight of meluzma. The commentaries explain that they're very similar. They're very similar size and shape weights, but they're in fact different. And that is even a higher standard of usability for the light in order to make a bracha. Rav Yehuda mevarech adabei ada daila. Now the Gemara tells us the practice of various sages and the opinions that they followed and how they utilized it. So Rav Yehuda, he was the one who said you can make a bracha even if you're 100 feet away, provided that you could see the flame. So what did he do in practice? In practice, he made a bracha on the fire, on the light that was coming out of the house of Adadaila. Even though the house was far away, it was distant from him, he couldn't actually use that light. But he said, as long as you can see the light, you can make the bracha. So he made the bracha from the fire that came out of the house of Adadaila. Rava mevarech adebe Guria Barchama. The Gemara tells us that Rava, he was of the position that you have to actually be able to use the light. You have to be close to the light. So he used the light that was coming out of the house of Guria Barchama. That house was very close to his house, close enough that he was actually able to utilize the flame. That's what he made a bracha on. Then the Gemara says, Abaye mevarech adebe baravua. The Gemara says that Abaye, he utilized the flame that was coming out of the house of Baravua. However, the Gemara does not explain whether the house was close or whether the house was far. All we know is that Abaye would make the bracha for Havdalah on the fire that emitted from the house of Baravua. The Gemara continues. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav, Ein machzirin al ha'or kederach machzirin al mitzvahs. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rav something very unique about the obligation to make a bracha on the flame during Havdalah. He says it's not the same type of obligation like a regular mitzvah. When it comes to the mitzvah of tefillin, if you don't have a pair of tefillin, You need to go out and make sure that you get yourself a pair of tefillin so you could put on tefillin. If Shabbos is coming and you don't have matches, you don't have a candle, you don't have anything to light Shabbos candles, you're obligated to go out and find for yourself matches and a candle so you could light Shabbos candles. However, when it comes to making a brach on the flame for Havdalah, you are supposed to do it. It's part of the ceremony and there's very powerful significance to it, but you're not obligated to search out and find one. If you don't have a candle in your house, if you don't have matches in your house, you're not obligated to go out and find a candle in order to make the bracha on, and it doesn't withhold the ceremony. So you can still do Havdalah. You take the cup and you can take the fragrances and make Havdalah even if you don't have the fire. Rav Zera says that when he first started making Havdalah, he would be very particular to find a candle. If he didn't have one in his house, he would go out and search and do whatever he could to make sure he had a candle for Havdalah. However, once I heard this teaching from Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rav, so now I don't go crazy to find a candle for Havdalah. However, if I have a candle, I make the bracha, and if I don't have a candle, so I don't make a bracha. Right, we are going to conclude right here, but I want to just add that while it's true the halacha is you don't have to have a candle to perform the Havdalah service, nevertheless, today I don't think there really is any excuse for any one of us. Candles are accessible, matches are accessible, and we should do whatever we can to make sure that we have the candle for Havdalah. And I hope that this week, at the conclusion of Shabbos, that you're able to make Havdalah beautifully and appropriately the way that we're meant to. And if for any reason you have not in the past, it's a beautiful thing to do, and it really highlights the distinction between Shabbos and the rest of the week. Get some wine or some grape juice, some spices, and a Havdalah candle, and make Havdalah the way it's meant to be. I hope everyone has a fabulous, wonderful, beautiful rest of the week. We'll be in touch.